As wild as it seems, it's not often that representatives are willing to listen to the people they actually represent. But today, I am joined by a representative who is willing to do just that. Representative Ryan Williams serves in the 42nd District of Tennessee and happens to represent a large portion of this very audience. Many of you have expressed concerns over some of the recent votes coming out of the Tennessee State House, and Representative Williams has graciously agreed to join the show so I can ask him some of the hard questions that you have about his voting record. All this and more, so stick around. Welcome to Forge and Anvil. Sorry we're late. We had some tech issues, but we're going to get rolling with it. We hammer out uncomfortable conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual race that we are living in. And we are glad to have all of you joining us on the live stream or in the playback on your podcast apps. So as I already mentioned at the top of the show, I'm joined by Representative Ryan Williams. So Ryan, go ahead and introduce yourself to those who are not yet familiar.
Hey guys, Ryan Williams, House District 42, as you said, father of two, married 27 years, serving the House District 42 for 13 years. Prior to that, city of Cookeville. My full-time job is I'm in the construction business. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Ryan. And real quick, just a quick laundry list. Those of you listening, if this is your first time, go ahead and go to forgeandanvil.substack.com. You can actually sign up with your email to get free content directly to your email and be updated on the show, as well as if you want to become a supporter of the show, you can get some exclusive content. So that's the only thing I'll plug tonight, other than like, share, subscribe, and repost this stream wherever. I really appreciate it. And if you send in your chats, we will take some of those chats live. But let's go ahead and dive straight into it since we had some tech issues that made us start late. So Ryan, first of all, I really appreciate your willingness to come on the show. Like I mentioned in the cold open, a lot of representatives are not willing to do that. So it does mean a lot that you're willing to come and talk to the people that you represent, because a lot of them are in this audience. And some of them may be in the chat tonight, but if not, they're definitely going to be listening to the playback on their podcast apps. So like I mentioned, I think overall, I think that you are an honest guy. From what I can tell, you've always been willing to come on the show, and this is your second time now, and obviously you're not afraid of being asked tough questions. That's why you got the job. So we appreciate that. But as I mentioned, there have been some votes coming out of the House that are concerning, some of which you voted for. So I wanted to kind of talk about those directly. I know the big one that we've already talked about is HB 1625. That's the bill that many are labeling a red flag law. Now, I know when I called you to talk about having you on the show, you mentioned that you thought that wasn't quite a fair characterization of the bill. So feel free to just kind of explain to us how you see the bill, why you voted on it. It was a roll call vote, so we didn't actually have you on record, but pretty much if you don't vote no on a bill like that, we can kind of assume you voted yes, and you've already told me that you did. So maybe just explain, your thinking behind it, what you hope the bill will accomplish, and we'll just go from there.
Well, thanks for having me on here. Since the time that you and I had our discussion, this bill has been on the House floor, so it has passed both the House and the Senate chambers now. When you and I talked previously, it was not a roll call vote. Roll call votes means you vote on the bill as your name is called. It was a voice vote in the subcommittee or the full committee that we talked about it before. So it was a voice vote. As it relates to my support of the bill, it's carried by Representative Jason Zachary. It was a bill that was discussed and passed in the House on the same footing. I think it passed the House floor with 6 no votes, 2 present not voting, and the remainder of it voting. What Zachary's bill did is change the definition of imminent threat and allowed for the current practice is, or prior to his law, the mental health counselor was required to notify law enforcement if someone posed an imminent threat, not an immediate threat. His bill changed the language to be immediate threat, and it allowed for, instead of that being notification being to law enforcement, it would be to the Department of Health for them to do it, because it would be a mental health issue. The reason why Some folks were concerned about it, albeit ended up being 6 people were concerned about it, is because the mental health community were concerned that if you required them to report to law enforcement, that it would, I guess you would say, step up the level of concern between the mental health person and mental health crisis and law enforcement, and go to a level of concern that's not a mental health concern as much as it is a law enforcement concern. So the reason for the bill was so that notification could be made to the Department of Health as it relates to this person's creating a immediate threat instead of an imminent threat. So there's not an expectation that this would happen very often, but they would notify the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse as it relates to that bill. As it relates to a red flag law, there were, of the 6 members that voted against it, I didn't hear any discussion in committee or on the House floor about it being, in their mind's eye, being dubbed as a red flag law. It was simply clarifying the difference between immediate and imminent threat, and allowing for a reporting agency other than law enforcement to be informed.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So the question I think really boils down to it's one of those measures where I think many well-meaning individuals naturally want to see people protected. They want to make sure that threats are of course taken seriously. But one of the big concerns about this bill that I have, and as well as other bills like this. Now, I know you've said you don't believe it's a red flag law. To me, I would say any bill that kind of comes from mental health individuals having the ability to report you, it really falls underneath the category of red flag law. And of course, that's kind of a catch-all term now because it's been used and abused. But the concern on my end is that first of all, this does seem to be an infringement, and to me, I'm a 2A absolutist. So to me, any form of infringement is negative and should not be passed by any stretch of the imagination. But then beyond that, when it comes to specifically to red flag laws, I really think that this will potentially prevent individuals from seeking mental health help that they may need. For example, like a veteran suffering from PTSD may not go to receive the proper therapy that they need if, let's say they're having night terrors or something like that, and they want to speak to someone about that. But they're a law-abiding citizen otherwise, and they don't want to have their rights revoked. Really, the reporting done in these instances, it really does, it does take away someone's ability to properly have probable cause. It really just allows the mental health professionals to ultimately just wave away someone's rights, and usually the confiscation of their firearms happens, and then they can go to court to actually fight to have those rights back. So it's kind of backwards from what how our system is supposed to work. So I mean, what's your thoughts on that? And as a whole, since it is in my mind an infringement, are you a 2A absolutist? I mean, what's your philosophy on that?
First of all, that's multiple faceted questions, so I'll back up and try to get it, and
Right.
then if I don't answer the other one, I'll come back to it. So as it relates to this being a red flag laws as defined usually are ones where, like you said, they would take someone's rights away. All this has to do is with Department of Mental Health. Department of Mental Health doesn't have the ability to take anyone's rights away. If it's adding an intermediary step to protect those people by the example that you gave, so that there could be a secondary mental health counselor or advisor communicate with that person, or to review the chart to see if they truly were in an immediate threat instead of an imminent threat. That's why I think although you and I agree on red flag issues, I don't think that this applies to the strictest definition of what you're saying. I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I just don't see where the two overlap in the same way that you do. And then you had the last question. I tried to store it away, but I couldn't.
So your general philosophy on Second Amendment rights, how do you view it? Do you view it as a 2A absolutist?
Yeah, of course it is. My Second Amendment voting history is stellar. As a matter of fact, most gun owner groups, if they have a concern or question about my Second Amendment support, I just tell them to look at my voting record. I mean, 100% on everything I've had an opportunity to vote for, I've voted in favor of supporting people's Second Amendment rights. So to say that this bill is somehow a red flag law, I just don't think it applies for the reasons why I told you previously.
So just to clarify then, so this law would ultimately require a mental health professional to then notify the 988 number specifically, to basically let them know they've got an individual that they believe to be a threat. So then that individual then goes on to get assessed by a second mental health professional. Is that what I understood then?
It's my understanding that the 988 call will generate a call. That practitioner calls that person, notifies them of it, and then they reach back out to that mental health counselor to get more information as to what it is. As it relates to mental health, what we were trying to do is not notify law enforcement because we didn't want to impugn anyone's right. We didn't want to escalate it to the point where it was a law enforcement thing. It was mainly about trying to get people the mental health they need, maybe from a secondary person in the case of contacting the Department of Health, but also give that mental health practitioner the resources or being able to give them a stopgap measure to help them better understand the situation from a third party perspective instead of just their own and their experience there, while preserving the person's mental health identity, if you will.
So Michaela over on YouTube said, "Isn't that like Big Brother telling on you?" And I think that's kind of the understanding that a lot of people have, and like a lot of the beef with this bill. I think most gun owners are just frustrated with this bill in general because they believe that it's just gonna ultimately just lead to more instances where now you've got law enforcement kind of looking into you, seeing if you're mentally fit to own firearms. And the reality is, just talking constitutionally for a moment here, the Constitution doesn't say, if you're mentally fit, you get a firearm. It just says that it shall not be infringed ultimately. And that's similar. The Tennessee state constitution says similarly. So, I mean, what's your take on that?
On her comment?
Yeah, on her comment and those concerns.
Well, I understand the concerns that you stated as it relates to her. Is it Big Brother? I really don't know. I don't really see it as Big Brother personally. I think for me, I'm also, you have on the other hand where we have a mental health patient whose counselor did not have a secondary thought or idea to do that. And what ended up happening is this person was extremely mentally ill and they went and took the lives of 6 other people. But in this instance, this would have just given that mental health provider the ability to get a second set of eyes on it relates to what's going on there. As it relates to the Second Amendment and its infringement, we have infringements in the statute, both federally and state, as it relates to somebody who is commits a crime with a weapon. It doesn't say in the Constitution, doesn't say that their right shall not be infringed, even if they commit a crime with a weapon. If someone did that, so I guess what you're suggesting is if someone is convicted felon and they committed a crime with a weapon, that they too should be able to have their Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, and that's something to be debated. I mean, for me, I very much view the Second Amendment, at least in regards to it, should absolutely apply to those of us who don't have a criminal record. And I think the mental health concerns ultimately boil down to, these are individuals who haven't committed a crime, and it's kind of like the punishment coming before the crime.
No, I don't disagree with what you're saying. But I think we all can agree that there are certain instances, particularly when heinous crimes are committed with a handgun or a weapon of any kind, that though we should protect the citizenry from people like that because of their actions, and there have to be repercussions to those actions in order to do that. If we didn't have that, then we would have, like the gentleman that killed Julian Ludwig, he would be able to have a weapon now, even though he'd been charged but not adjudicated on 3 crimes. So I think it's one of those things where you have to look at it based upon the current practice. And the current practice is what we were trying to do is find a secondary measure for mental health practitioners so that they didn't escalate it to the point where someone's Second Amendment right would be infringed. And that's why I don't agree that that would necessarily be the case with this bill.
Hmm. So how does it relate to the Bruin standard? That's what Larry over on Rumble wanted to ask.
That's a good question. As I said at the beginning of the statute, or at my introduction, I'm in the construction business, so this is a part-time job. I haven't read the Bruin statute its entirety. I've read components or portions of the Bruin as it relates to certain questions that are asked in committee, but as it relates to how that Bruin standard relates to this bill, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd be happy to get back with you on it.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll follow
Yeah.
up with you on that.
Yeah.
Well, I know we can talk about HB 1625 all night. I think that to some degree, you and I are just going to agree to disagree. I personally wouldn't have passed it, but again, that's where I try to be an absolutist about that. And to me, anything that could even potentially be a slippery slope against gun rights, I think it's just a no go. And I think many in the audience would probably agree to that. And of course, feel free to say any last thoughts on that before we move on here, but I definitely want to talk to you a lot about immigration as well. But any last thoughts on HB 1625 that you wanted to express?
Not really anything in particular. I will say, part of the reason why I agree to come on these podcasts with you and others or have discussions about it is, prior to the committee vote, I hadn't heard from you, and in full transparency, I hadn't heard from anybody from 42nd District that had a problem with it. So, part of that is me being a good legislator is being a good listener, but I can't hear if people don't speak.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I know you mentioned to me on the phone the importance of a civics lesson. You said that you miss a lot of emails because you've got someone from the Chattanooga area messaging you about what's happening in DC all the time, and and maybe that could be. I believe I did send out an email about that, but I could be wrong about that. I'm trying to always blast out emails whenever I see legislation. So it's definitely it's your responsibility as a representative, as well as it's our responsibility as citizens to be communicating, what we do and don't want passed in the Tennessee. But, at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we're following the Constitution. And that's where my concern as far as the 2A go. I personally don't think that this should fly under the Tennessee state constitution nor our federal constitution. But we don't need to keep pounding on that door. Let's go ahead and pivot for a bit to talk about immigration, because I know that's another huge one that our audience is concerned with. So right now, the big concern is that most individuals that I talk to don't feel like the Tennessee House of Representatives has actually done much to stop illegal immigration coming to Tennessee. Specifically, we do things like we provide licenses for legal immigrants who want to come and work here, and we provide education. And it really just seems like, although we are not the worst offender of the 50 states, we definitely have benefits that illegal immigrants get to benefit from when they come here in the state. So many individuals are concerned that there's not a lot of action in Nashville to actually stop the illegal immigration. So first of all, what do you see? I know there's some stuff being considered right now in this legislative session. So what do you see coming down the pike that can actually have some teeth to stopping illegal immigration? And what's your overall take on illegal immigrants in the state of Tennessee?
Yeah, it's really, really hard. As you know, there was a court case from Texas that their attorney general recently filed as it relates to whether they could enforce the federal statute or not in Texas. I've asked the attorney general to join that lawsuit, mainly because my concern is there's been more people come across the southern border in the last 3 years than reside in the state of Tennessee. Let that sink in for a minute.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. And you're right. I think there's not a whole lot that we can do in the state as it relates to that other than advocate for change with our federal delegation as to what's going on. Your listeners nor my family have to go very far to realize that, Washington is not necessarily working. It's a very, very difficult place. It's been in gridlock for decades, not years. And it's been with continuing resolution after continuing resolution with no remedy for the American people that they seek to represent. So for that, it's very frustrating. We can all take a trip to the southern border, but you don't need to. All you need to do is turn on the news and listen to whether it's Laken Riley gets killed down in Georgia or somewhere else. All these crimes are being committed, people beating up a law enforcement officer in New York and then being let go. In Tennessee, that doesn't happen. We prosecute criminals based upon wherever they're going. They don't. I'm sure there's examples all over the states that say that. I will say, we've passed tonight. We passed another resolution sponsored by Representative Barrett, super good member. I signed on as a co-prime sponsor, asking the federal government, particularly the Biden administration, to reenact the rules that the Trump administration had 3 years ago, which really stemmed the problem that we have in our states today. We also, I had the opportunity to go to Millington back in August and going in June, where we're deploying 250 of Tennessee's finest National Guardsmen to the southern border to help law enforcement agencies there, including the U.S. Marshal's Office, try to stem the tide. The truth of the matter is, we were one of the first states in the nation to do that. We've been doing that for well over 2 years now. We see it as a good investment in the safety and security of Tennesseans, and we think it's something that we are required to do, and we're going to continue to do that. And I know in talking with the governor's office, they're going to continue to do that as well. Those 250 that we sent down there were true volunteers. They are getting paid for their time as guardsmen, but the fact of the matter is we could have sent 500 because that many people of our young, best and brightest guardsmen volunteered to do that. And so for that, I'm very excited. I think, my encouragement to your listeners and to all across people, contact your district attorneys, make sure that they're prosecuting crimes as you see them with these folks as much. And if we can deport them or send them somewhere else, we definitely should. It's been a big challenge as it relates to funding associated with those. I think I was front and center when the Biden administration started flying people to Chattanooga and Knoxville, and we didn't know where they were going at the time. We've done a really good job of stemming that in the last 2 year and a half. And so they're not bringing those young folks here anymore. The fact of the matter is it's 163 nations. The last numbers I saw, the number of Chinese nationals that were coming is very concerning to me. Not to mention from all the other countries who wish us harm. Those make me really nervous. And so we can continue to do the things that we're talking about. The only other place where I could imagine that state dollars are being spent would be in the education space. If someone takes, if I would just give you an example. If Catholic Charities takes immigrants as it relates to the diocese in Knoxville, and they take these illegal immigrants, undocumented, whatever you want to call them, these folks who cross our southern border illegally, and they take them and they place them with families during that process of trying to figure out what to do with them, we probably do educate a few of those. But I know that in this case, like in our public schools, as it relates to the healthcare, we're not like the federal government where somebody's getting $1,000 on a debit card every 2 weeks. It's just simply not happening here.
Right.
And it won't happen here because we're just not going to do it. But those states where they are willing to do it are doing it to great detriment to their own citizens, not just as it relates to employment, but also as it relates to their voting rights. They've been pretty particular about saying we're going to register these people to vote in other states. That's not happening in Tennessee. You have to be a legal citizen to vote. And so we've talked to the Secretary of State about that. We on many fronts, as you could say, and I'm probably talking too long, we're doing all that we can with the toolbox that we have to make sure that our taxpayers are not paying for any of this.
So I definitely think that, first of all, I appreciate what you said, because I think that it's true. There's a lot of good things that Tennessee has done, especially when compared to states like New York. But, that's unfortunately a low bar that they set for us to surpass. So, I always want to do better, as a state. You said that it doesn't really happen in terms of, these illegal immigrants committing these crimes here. And these individuals, to your point, they were charged. But in September of 2023, there was a twice deported illegal immigrant from Honduras charged with 2 murders in Nashville. And then in July 2023, there was a soccer coach in Franklin who was charged with drugging nearly 12 dozen boys. And I mean, it's ridiculous. He was found to be living in the U.S. illegally for a good 20 years. So, I mean, I know that Tennessee, they're not as bad as some states, but again, like what are we doing to actually stop the spread of illegal immigrants coming to the state? I mean, I feel like so many of the individuals that I speak to are just wanting the state to kind of mobilize and kick these people out of our state, as well as shut off the funding, because we have a lot of our public dollars are going to education, and a lot of illegal immigrants get to take advantage of that. And there's just there was, of course, the Chattanooga story that you already mentioned. There's just been a lot of incidences of illegal immigration putting a strain on the Tennessee taxpayers. But beyond just the taxpayers, there's examples like I just gave of these individuals coming, and for some reason, it's been a trend with these illegal immigrants over the last year that they're targeting children a lot. So I think many of my audience is really wanting the Tennessee legislature to enforce harsher penalties to these individuals, as well as to actually send these people out of the state altogether and cut off any flow of any dollars that might provide any incentive to these individuals. It's not because we don't have a heart for these individuals. It's because we have a heart for our citizens first. And I believe that you can make a biblical argument for why you should take care of your own household first. So, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you foresee, greater action being taken?
Yeah, of course I do. We have a bill this year. William Lambert's carrying it. Probably speaks volumes as it relates to the soccer coach. I know a little bit about that. I wasn't aware of the 2 murders that you talked about in Nashville. I don't know where the adjudication process is for those criminals, or where they are now. I'd be interested to know if you do know that. But Leader Lambert and our team have gotten together. We have a law that we're looking at passing, which would make rape of a child a death penalty case, which is a huge deterrent as it relates to that. So those, under the example of the soccer coach you were talking about, that would apply to him if it were to occur after the passage of that law. It's a big, and what we're trying to do is create deterrence as it relates to certain things and make it harder for criminals, illegal or otherwise, to commit those crimes. I don't, to be honest, I would have to check in with my district attorney, General Dunaway, and ask him, have we had a illegal immigrant commit a crime in the 42nd in the judicial 13th district? What is the process for that? It's my understanding that was no doubt in my mind, based upon my relationship with him and his kids and my kids, that he'd prosecute these crimes. The question is, we would be spending quite a bit of taxpayer dollar to incarcerate them. And so are we deporting them? Can we deport them? I based upon the Biden administration, I don't think that we can, but that's a good question for me to ask. That I don't know that, because it's not really come across my radar as to what, if that did happen in judicial 13th, what would be the repercussions of it? I know that's kind of a non-answer, but I don't want to hypothetically say that he's doing that when I don't know for certain that he is.
Right. And I appreciate that. I'd rather you give me the honest truth than, try to pull something out of thin air. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's very obvious that the Biden administration is breaking the law of the land. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think anyone questions that. Even when the Supreme Court sides with them, I think it's a very political decision. I mean, it's very obvious that there's not some hidden text in the Constitution that says that if an immigrant crosses over the border and has their child here, then that child is now a citizen, and so that's what's causing anchor babies. And then it's been exposed many times over that the Biden administration is helping illegals to cross And of course, they were the ones flying them straight into Tennessee, into Chattanooga. So at the end of the day, I understand the concern for, are we able to do this? Are we not? But at the end of the day, as a state, I do believe that we have the right to assert ourselves. As far as a biblical standpoint, I think that when the greater magistrate is not doing their job, the lesser magistrate, it's their responsibility to step up and defend its people. And I'm throwing that lesser magistrate doctrine out there for those who want to briefly understand it. But also speaking constitutionally, we are technically the greater magistrate anyways. The states created the federal government. The federal government did not create the states. So, I understand your hesitancy, but I really think that we are living in times where, unfortunately, I think we need to flex our state muscles more than we are. And that may even include constitutional showdowns where we really see, is this constitutional? I don't know. We're going to try it and find out. We'll see what happens, because that's honestly what the left has been doing for decades now. And obviously they've been very successful at that. And the Biden administration is just flagrantly flaunting our immigration laws, and they're breaking them every single day. And at the end of the day, I think it's the legislature's responsibility as well as the governor's responsibility to defend Tennesseans and to make sure that these violent illegal immigrants are not in their communities.
I couldn't agree more. I wouldn't disagree with anything that you said there. As it relates to I don't know the biblical text as it relates to upper magistrate and lower magistrate. Maybe you can give me an education on that, give me something to read. But the truth of the matter is we do make the laws of the land. And, I've been a big supporter of the 10th Amendment and what our rights and rules and authority are, and where their powers are vested in our ability to do that. We've looked at everything from constitutional conventions, Article 5, in order to try to do things like that. But the big challenge is it's really hard to get people to agree on anything in the state, much less 26 other ones. So it makes a path very difficult. And, I was reading the other day, the challenges that we face are not going to be addressed by the faint of heart. It's not going to be done that. It's just going to take some real leadership. And I think in this instance, it's something that majority of my colleagues in the state would like to see. I just, as it relates to the mechanism of how to deal with the federal government as it relates to immigration, I'm not certain what that would be at this point. So, but I think there's, without question, when you look at those resolutions that we sent to the federal government, the Biden administration, as it relates to what they've done with immigration or the lack thereof. Sorry, cleaning people. It's late. No one's here. So the immigration, we don't need immigration reform. We need the laws of the land being enforced. I mean, that's where we are. And when they don't do that, then it makes everyone's life a lot more difficult, and ours here in the state as well.
Yeah. And I think that's ultimately, what part of what this conversation is about is we want to make sure that you understand as representative of the 42nd district, that you understand what time it is. And I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying that's my hope. My hope is to understand that you do, because, we really, I truly think that this is an intentional demolition of the country. I think that those who think that it's just ignorance, I think that they are a bit naive at this point. I think that it's been pretty clear how flagrant the Biden administration wants to destroy our country. I don't think it's necessarily as dramatic as some people want to lay it out, but I think that there's a intentional goal of crippling the U.S. I
think it's intentional, and I think it's purposeful. I don't think it's anything other than we just came out of the 3 darkest years probably in American history, and most of the people don't know.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's where we want to see the state flex its muscles and say no. Ron DeSantis, a lot of people have mixed feelings on him because of the primary, but at the end of the day, he really did really show us the importance of a governor and the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. And we want to see that in Tennessee. I think, unfortunately, many individuals don't feel like we have that same type of leadership coming from Bill Lee and coming from the Speaker of the House. And, I have no issues with these gentlemen. I think that they seem like great great individuals. But at the end of the day, we need people who understand the times that we're living in. We need like the men of Issachar who know the times that we live in, and I think we need people to step up and defend their citizens from an overreaching government. Paul Vaughn is another individual I wanted to talk to you briefly about too. I'm sure you've heard his story. Are you familiar with it?
No, not really. Let me go back to what you said a minute ago, though.
Sure.
Sometimes it gets a little bit lost, and I don't hear this very often because when people do their research a little bit, there's not a law that we haven't passed or one that we didn't pass before Florida did. The problem is that there's a greater platform for Florida to have those communications because of the size of their state. Whether we were sending people to border before Florida was, we were enacting cryptocurrency things before they were, not cryptocurrency, but digital currency. We've been dealing with ESG. We got 2 bills dealing with ESG this year, and debanking people with faith or different worldview than the tech world that's out there today that seems to be proliferating every corner of our lives. But in a lot of cases, we're doing those things first. I'm surprised when I talk to people, when are we going to do this? And we already did it.
Right.
I don't know how to tell you that, but and as it relates to Governor DeSantis, I have a bill that I tried to pass this year. I'm not going to be able to do it, but I look at it too. Part of the problem we have, and this is just my personal view, part of the problem we have is we have lifelong people that are serving, and at some point in time, you have to move from one generation to another, particularly in leadership. And we haven't had that in generations here in our states. And so
right.
I looked at Ron DeSantis, not because I thought he was better than Donald Trump. I looked at Ron DeSantis because I was like, hey guys, it's time to move on. I mean, when you're 70, it doesn't matter if it's Mitch McConnell at 78, Nancy Pelosi at 78, or Joe Biden at 78, or Donald Trump at 76. These are some older folks, that at some point in time, you have to go and be, city fathers who sit by the gate and communicate with the young leaders of the time and instill wisdom into them. And if you're out there having a hard time shuffling to the next committee, it's probably not time for you to be leading. And that's just my personal opinion as it relates to that, because I feel like that, the jokes about the things being led by seniors, it's not funny, and it's not. I don't really enjoy it that much. So, that's just me, Ryan Williams talking, and so I'm really concerned about the direction, because you have to have people that are going to get out there and fight for what's right, and it's hard to find them.
Yeah. So are you officially calling for Randy McNally to resign then?
No.
I'm trying to get you in trouble.
Yeah. No, the truth of the matter is that, we have to create pathways for people to move through and in the system. It's really hard for somebody. Like, I could never run for a state office greater than the one I'm running now unless I bought a Powerball ticket and I won. It's not going to happen, because you have to be independently wealthy. Your sole business owner. I'm one of maybe 5 or 6 guys that work for somebody else out of 99 members of the House. And my company makes great sacrifice for me to be here. I provide for 47 other families and the way that they live, because I have to sell construction services for that company. I'm a commission only sales guy. And when I'm here 4.5 months out of the year, I'm not providing for my family like I could be. And so I think there need to be more citizen legislators in every stage of government, from school board to county commission to city council to state representative to state senate. And the big challenge is, unless people kind of coalesce around those folks, we're going to continue to get the same challenges we have now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I appreciate your vision on that. And, I was just trying to get you in trouble with the McNally comment, but that's just me being a stinker.
He's been here for a long time. And I think I think he's done a great service to our state. I really do. But I think the future is going to spell out a lot as it relates to that subject matter.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we don't have a lot of time left. I just want to make sure I mention Paul Vaughn's story to you because I brought it up a moment ago. So Paul Vaughn is one of the individuals that has been charged with the FACE Act and is now looking at 11 years in prison for essentially singing hymns in an abortion clinic. So he is from the Murfreesboro area, if I'm not mistaken. And chat, feel free to correct me because I'm doing this off of memory here. But either way, he's a prime example where when you actually look at the case, Paul did not break a single Tennessee law. And the overreach that's happening now, it is very clear that the Biden administration is now going above and beyond to target pro-life individuals, and they are making a point to over-prosecute on instances like the FACE Act, which is normally something that's going to give you a slap on the wrist, kind of maybe you'll pay a fine or do community service or something. But instead, these individuals are facing 11 years in jail. And Paul Vaughn, I don't remember if he faced the exact same treatment as Mark Houck over in Pennsylvania, but I know there's been multiple instances of these individuals being met with a SWAT team at their doors. And I think Paul had something similar to that. I don't know if it's quite as drastic, but I do believe that he had agents show up to his door. And essentially, the federal government is reaching into the state of Tennessee and trying to pluck this guy out and throw him in jail for 11 years for protesting at an abortion clinic. And then, of course, you never see the exact same type of treatment happening to individuals who are protesting outside of a pro-life organization or like a pregnancy center or firebombing a pregnancy center for that matter, let alone protesting. So, as a state representative, obviously, I understand the civics don't allow you a whole lot of say in this area, but I think it might be wise to look into filing some sort of at least if it's in symbol only, maybe something to kind of condemn the actions of the Biden administration, or raise awareness to Paul's story. I mean, in reality, I think that the AG should probably step in and say, no, you're not taking him. I know that that's the type of talk that a lot of people don't want to hear, but I really don't think that. I think Paul is very obviously being politically targeted, and I think this type of thing needs to be nipped in the bud immediately. And I wish that the governor and the AG would step in and do more. But that's where, as a state representative, I would maybe call on you to, to write out something to maybe force the hand of the AG and the governor. I think that Paul Vaughn needs all the support he can get from his state, because it's very obvious that the federal government is attacking Paul for being pro-life, despite him not breaking any Tennessee laws. And that's an example where I think the lesser magistrate really needs to step up and flex their muscles.
Well, and I know a little bit about this subject matter because, like you, I'll do a little plug. I do listen to other podcasts, and I did hear about this the other time. It was about 2 weeks ago, I would say. I heard about this. He was on another show that I listen to frequently, and he was interviewed there for like 5 to 7 minutes. And if I remember, Faces was passed 19 years ago. No one had ever been prosecuted.
Under Clinton.
Yeah. No one had ever been prosecuted for this crime until 3 years ago was the first one under the Biden administration.
Right.
Paul Vaughn is the most recent one. I have been doing a little bit of part-time research on this because I didn't realize he was in Tennessee till I heard the story that I heard on another podcast. But the interesting part about this is that not only are they prosecuting him for a 2 decades old law that had never been prosecuted before, they're prosecuting him. They arrested him, prosecuted him after the overturn of Roe v. Wade by the court. And so you're like, what is there to prosecute? I mean, I get that, but it's no longer the law of the land, and that was the whole reason why this was passed years ago. But I will say, thankfully, in Tennessee, we joined other AGs across the nation, and we were able to stop abortion here in our state. And so I'm really excited about that. But on the other hand you're right. We could send a House Joint Resolution or Senate Joint Resolution asking the federal government not to do that. But a lot of times, we had 2 of those on the House floor today. A lot of times, they don't care. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but the actual being able to move the needle makes it much more difficult. The question should be, we should send letters and correspondence to our congressional delegation and U.S. senators and say, hey, what are you doing as it relates to Paul Vaughn? So I get it. And there's no question. I mean, I just, it's just unconscionable for me to even understand where they would even seek to prosecute somebody on a statute that's 20 years old that's not even the law of the land in Tennessee.
Yeah. Dylan over on YouTube said they hate Christians and arguing to be left alone will not work. We must wield power.
Mm.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I tend to agree with him, and that's a lot of what I'm advocating for. I don't like to advocate for such strong, potentially divisive stances, but the reality is, I mean, we're
This is,
all Paul Vaughn.
yeah.
We're all next on the chopping block if this is not immediately stopped. And I think the only way that it works is, the sometimes the way to stand up to a bully is to punch him in the nose. I mean, unfortunately, that's just kind of where we're at in our point in political history of the United States.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
agree.
Now, I know we got to get going here, but I really appreciate you coming on. Real quick, feel free to give me like a super quick answer to this question. Charles Cook over on Rumble said, since the Republicans took over in 2012, the state budget has more than doubled. When are Republicans going to cut spending?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I came in, it was $26.2 billion. It's $54.2 billion, I think now. I will say part of the reason for that, though, is that there are so many people fleeing blue states coming to Tennessee. Our actual growth in government has been huge, partly because of that, and the federal government sent us these monies that we've yet to spend. There's a lot of those monies that haven't been spent that have unbelievable rules and regulations on them. I couldn't agree more. The big challenge is if you have 680,000 more people today than you had when I got elected, then the actual revenue that's coming in, the service provided grows with that. And so I think there's always places to cut. I think the number last year was $2.6 billion that we've cut in state government since in the last 10 years. That was a 2-year-old number. And we're going to cut another $1.6 billion again this year. And even in spite of those cuts, the budget's still the same. So it's crazy. I mean, it just blows my mind. But the word's out. Tennessee's a place to live. It's one of the freest states in the United States. A great place to start a family. Great, grow your business or start a new business. We want people to continue to do that, even though it's harder now than it's ever been as it relates to borrowing money and the cost of goods and services. I was looking at numbers the other day, 18.9%. Inflation in 3 years. No wonder, my wife says, I don't even know what I bought at the grocery store this week, but it's so much more expensive and I come home with less. And that's because the rate of inflation has really hammered us in the state because the dollar that we're acquiring doesn't go as far as it once did, even though we're cutting all these services, employees, and the rate of government's still growing. The best way to stop it is to tell people not to move here. So it's tough. It's tough though, because you don't want to do that because we want to be the last great hope, really. And we're living in a great state. Everybody has problems, come to my house. We got problems too. It's just part of it. But Lord's put me here for a reason and for a period of time. I'm going to try to be like the men of Issachar. My favorite story about that is when you look through that story, you look at how many different tribes there were and how many men that were counted in each of those tribes. And the very smallest one were the men of Issachar. And it doesn't take many, but they do make an impact. And so hopefully I can be one of those guys, or I aspire to be. And so maybe if I keep hammering away at it, we'll make some progress.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Where can people go to keep up with everything you're doing?
You can email me at rep.ryan.williams@capitol.tn.gov. You can call me. My legislative office is 615-741-1875. I've got social media stuff out there, but I got to be honest with you, I'm sick of it. It's become a cesspool of, and it's very difficult. Don't message me on Facebook because I don't really answer that very much, but you call me. My phone number is listed in the phone book. I tell you what it is, but I can't remember it right now because no one uses a phone. But I'm the guy at Kroger picking up milk just like everybody else. Say hey and tell me what you're feeling. I really want to know. And if I need somebody to pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, this is what I think, and this is what you did, and this is why you're wrong, and I'm happy to listen to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate you coming on. I've got a hard out, so I'll have to jump off here, but thank you again for joining us, and thank you all for listening. Go ahead and share this and go to our Substack, forgeandanvil.substack.com. We appreciate your support. We'll see you next time.